You know bullies? You know what a bully is, right? You know the bully, I've always, and I found it throughout my life, a bully is the weakest person. One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada.
President Trump thinks Canada will cave in. We will never, ever bow down to a bully.
Canada only works as a state. It doesn't, we don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S., just a straight artificial line. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also.
Donald Trump wants to break us so America can own us. They want our land. They want this land. They want our resources. They want our water. They want our country. Never! Because Canada is not America. It is not for sale. It's not America. It never was. Never will be.
Trump's Commerce Secretary, as well as frequent character in the Epstein files, Howard Lutnick, went in front of the Senate today and said this about Canada.
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
Look, the only reason Canada is boycotting U.S. spirits is because Trump randomly placed tariffs on Canada out of nowhere. Also, it's not a secret Trump's been trying to bully Canada into becoming the 51st state. Canada did not start this one. Trump did. Obviously, everyone knows it.
Canada's economy leans on the incredible $30 trillion economy of America. But
there's no doubt about that, Mr. Secretary. But insulting our closest ally and neighbor who provides a lot of business, we have a lot of businesses in New Hampshire, small businesses who work on both sides of the border. We have all those Canadian visitors who are not coming because of your comments and comments by the administration. How does that help our economy?
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
It is.
And disrespectful to America that they won't
Absolutely.
even put...
And my husband has an interest in a company that has American spirits. And they won't do it because of the insults from this president and comments like yours. So I want to go on to another question.
But can I have just one small comment, which is dairy is treated so badly, and your state cares about dairy, and we are trying desperately to get them to live to the deal that they have on USMCA and stop treating our dairy farmers so poorly, and your state cares about that, and we are fighting for that.
We do, but we are not going to get agreement when we keep insulting people. When we have allies and partners, we should try and work with them, not insult them.
That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world, okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy. Right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars. I mean, is this nuts?
Canadians are legitimately upset by the unjustifiable tariffs and comments that the president has made. And, you know, as the Prime Minister has said, nobody can control Donald Trump. As Mr. Harper said, we have to focus not on how the president's words and deeds make us feel, but on what we can do to adapt.
Lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. It's the greatest country in the world to be a regular person. We're institutionalized when equalization was first introduced in 1950 and then embedded in our Constitution in 1982. And by protecting services like childcare, dental care, pharmacare, we strengthen the sense of security that Canadians rely on every day. Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy, in security, and in rich cultural exchange. But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian.
You know, it's hysterical, the MAGA response to Canadians boycotting American products and canceling their trips to the United States. Well, we're not going to buy Canadian products. Honey, that's going to be hard because you can't even identify Canada on a map, let alone Canadian-made products, so good luck with that.
Are we trying to be America's enemy, or did I miss something? Because last time I checked, the United States is ran by Donald Trump, not Barack Hussein Obama. And at the same time, Canada's cozying up to China behind the scenes. So which one is it? Are we aligned with America, or are we positioning ourselves against our biggest trading partner? And didn't Mark Carney just talk about wanting a deal with America? Do you think Trump looks at this bullshit and says, yeah, let's reward that? Now, if I'm Trump, I say screw you. Because when you're dealing with someone like Trump, he doesn't negotiate with confusion. He punishes it. And right now, Canada looks stupid. This is how countries fall behind.
This may actually surprise some people, but a CTV News survey, which is looking at Canadians boycotting U.S. goods, services, and travel, have actually found that the number of people boycotting these things is actually increasing. They found out that in September 2025, the number of Canadians polled who would boycott U.S. goods, services, and also travel was 56%. They did the similar survey again in May 2026, and the number had increased by 10% to 66%. So that's a 10% increase of Canadians who were refusing to travel to the United States, choosing to buy products from other countries other than the United States, or not using US-based services. Folks,
so we've got some big news. Some Canadian airlines are ending flights to Nashville and other U.S. destinations as Canadian travelers cancel their flights to the U.S. in droves due to Trump's attacks on their country. Data from travel agency Flight Centre Travel Group Canada showed leisure bookings to U.S. cities dropped 40% in February over last February, with 1 in 5 customers canceling U.S. trips over the previous 3 months. The Hill reports that Canadian airline Flair Airlines recently announced it would end flights to Nashville. Air Canada says it is reducing flights to Arizona, Florida, and Las Vegas starting this month, and WestJet says it's seen bookings shift from the U.S. to places like Mexico and the Caribbean. Sunwing Airlines has dropped all its U.S. flights, while Air Transat has reduced service to the country. Meanwhile, another Canadian airline, Porter Airlines, told the National Post it was pulling back on its advertising of American destinations because, quote, some Americans may view this negatively.
So the Canadian boycott of travel to the United States has hit a new milestone. The number of Canadians traveling by car from Canada to the United States has now dropped 12 months in a row. This is due to U.S. aggression towards Canada and its people.
Which is why we should be really good friends with Canada. Like, what the fuck's going on? Trump ruined that whole thing, man. Because if he didn't talk about turning Canada into the 51st state, the Conservatives were going to win. Yeah. Pierre Poilievre would have taken over. It would have been like, they would have like eased a lot of the restrictions, made it a lot more common sense.
Dude, China was just up there. They just made a huge deal to get all their cars from China now. We're not going to sell any American cars in Canada.
Family, more and more Canadians are beginning to ask a question that once sounded unthinkable. Is MAGA America becoming the real enemy of Canada? And definitely not America as a whole, not ordinary Americans trying to survive and live peacefully, but the aggressive political ideology that has reshaped parts of the United States under the MAGA movement. And honestly, family, the fact that the question is even being discussed tells you just how dramatically things have changed. And for decades, family, Canada and the United States were seen as inseparable allies. They share the world's longest international border, massive trade relationships, military partnerships, cultural exchanges, tourism, and even millions of family connections across both countries. And so Canadians grew up seeing America as their closest friend, even if they sometimes disagreed politically. But in recent years, family, many Canadians have started feeling deeply uncomfortable with what they are witnessing south of the border. And the rise of extreme polarization, hostility toward immigrants, attacks on democratic institutions, aggressive nationalism, and even the culture was surrounding MAGA politics and creating a level of anxiety that Canada hasn't historically felt towards the United States. And what's especially interesting is that this tension isn't mainly about military conflict or even traditional war. It's psychological, it's cultural, it's economic and ideological. And Canadians are increasingly worried that the instability in America is spilling across the border. They see political rage dominating the news cycle every day. They watch conspiracy theories becoming mainstream. They see healthcare rights under attack, education becoming politicized, racial tensions escalating, and even democratic norms constantly challenged. And many Canadians are asking themselves, is this movement continues growing, how long before it starts seriously affecting Canada too? And one of the biggest reasons this conversation has intensified is because Canada's identity is often built in contrast to America. Canadians tend to pride themselves on universal healthcare, stronger social safety nets, multiculturalism, stricter gun laws, and even general calmer political environment. And so when MAGA figures openly mock Canadians' healthcare system, attack Canadian policies, or even threaten trade retaliation, many Canadians interpret it as hostility not just toward the government, but towards Canadian values themselves. And as a family, perception matters. Once people begin viewing a political movement as hostile to their national identity, trust begins collapsing very quickly. And another issue making Canadians nervous is economic dependency. Canada's economy is heavily connected to the United States, and whenever political chaos erupts in America, Canadians often feel the impact almost immediately. And trade tensions, tariffs, supply chain disruptions, and even sudden policy shifts create fear about Canada's future stability. And during the Trump years, family, there were moments where Canadian leaders openly appeared concerned about whether long-standing diplomatic norms would continue holding. And while some Americans dismiss Canadian concerns as exaggerated, many Canadians genuinely feel like they are living next to a superpower going through an identity crisis. And at the same time, this conversation also reveals something deeper about how political movements reshape international relationships. And you can see that Canadians are not suddenly anti-American. In fact, many Canadians still love ordinary Americans. They visit America frequently, they consume American entertainment daily, and even maintain close friendships across the border. And what worries them is the unpredictability of extreme political movements that seem fueled by anger, by resentment, and even division. And to many Canadians, MAGA politics increasingly represents instability rather than partnership. But family, there's also another side of this story that deserves honesty. Not all Americans support MAGA ideology, and even within Canada, there are growing right-wing populist movements inspired by MAGA politics. So this isn't simply Canada versus America. It's really a larger battle over values, over democracy, over identity, and the direction modern societies are heading. And many Canadians fear that the political extremism spreading through parts of America could eventually normalize similar divisions within Canada itself. And once political polarization reaches a certain point, family, rebuilding national unity becomes incredibly difficult. And what makes this moment so fascinating is how quickly perceptions can change between neighboring countries. And a relationship once defined almost entirely by trust and cooperation is now increasingly shaped by caution, by anxiety, and even by political uncertainty. And Canadians are watching America closely because what happens there rarely stays there. And America's influence is simply too large economically, culturally, and even politically. And whether people like it or not, MAGA politics has changed now. Many countries, including Canada, how they view the United States. And the real question now is whether this tension is temporary or the beginning of a long-term shift in how Canadians see their closest ally.